about 7 years, I've been involved in trying to redesign democracy using technology. So I've worked with technologies that are known as blockchain. I've spent time with organizations such as Democracy Earth Foundation. So they were using things like fluid democracy, or ways for to change how citizens vote and engage in platforms. And I really thought that this was the way that we had to go. It was around the same time as the referendum in between Scotland and England, or between the UK and Scotland at that time. And I was sort of looking around going, there's something not right here. We're missing the process, and we're spending too much time looking at the point. And that's what led me into working with organizations like Democracy Earth Foundation and Digital Peace Talks. But what I was really aware of, having spent a lot of time as a facilitator, and phrases that Liz and Pete and Andy had mentioned tonight, such as theory change and different methodologies that they were introducing you to, and the bingo setup. These are spaces that I've spent a lot of time in. So I know about the magic convening individuals in that space. And what has always been a big challenge for me is, can that magic transcend into virtual environments? Is there an element that's lost in those spaces? So I've spent a number of years playing around with that question, and in particularly the question which is, how might we improve the conversations? So that looks at a very holistic view of how technology is making us talk together, and what it's doing. Is it increasing the health? Is it decreasing the health? Being involved with organizations such as the Centre for Humane Technology. So they were heavily involved in what has become known as the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and all the stuff that's going on in that space just now. And what I've been really focused on trying to do is to make this space that we're in tonight a lot more suitable for dialogue and discussion. So I'm the founder of a platform called Tula.town. So it's built to help citizens gather in virtual space. And we've been working a lot on trying to help citizen assemblies to scale. And why we think this space is good for that is there's a number of reasons which transcend the current situation that we've been in, that we found ourselves in as citizens. So we've been doing this for about 3 years, and all of a sudden people are paying attention to us. So that's quite interesting. But just now in Scotland, there's a citizen assembly that is a national citizen assembly that's running. And the tender for that process, which we were an organisation that were considering going in for that, came to about the total of £200,000 to run this citizen assembly. It's a national one. And a lot of the expense on that goes down to the physical venue and the moving human beings back and forward to that physical venue. And we believe that engaging, like many of the world are doing just now, is a much better and gentler way for us to convene. And if we can get past the cultural differences in this space, and by that I mean that it's not necessarily to do with culture as we understand it, but more as one to do with, we're new to this space, so there's certain behaviors that we're not all accustomed to. So for example, having our mics muted, or making sure that we don't have any of the other distractions around here. So some of you may have noticed that people's phones went off this evening, and there is, now there's a whiteboard popped up on my screen. So that's a prime example of some of the challenges that you have in these spaces, is that you're subject to so many distractions. So there was people's phones going off, and instantly you saw the whole audience just looking down to see if it was theirs. So we spend a lot of time trying to figure out, how do we increase the same sort of social cues that we're used to in physical space, but doing it in the space that we're gathering tonight. so to help us to be able to gather more gently. And what's been really interesting is seeing things like what Liz mentioned about when you were introducing it, that many people sort of said, so what, you know, or the other thing that you might come up against when you're introducing citizen assemblies is that many people will mention it's a talking shop. And maybe 2 years ago, we created a pop-up university to find solutions to reduce plastic waste. And we delivered it in a hybrid fashion. So we had people in a room, and we also facilitated people that were not physically in the room. And what we noticed in doing that was that the horizons of the conversations that we were able to hold there were much larger. We had people from Uganda joining us, from South Korea, and so on. And the input because of that was much richer. And basically what I'm hoping to pass over to you guys this evening is that this space holds an opportunity for us to do such things. The horizons of our conversations become really rich in this space, and it allows us to do it a lot more gently than other ways that we've been doing before. And one thing that I would be also really interested to hear and see if some of the questions talk more of later on this evening is, we've spoken briefly about the process of gathering, and there's all different methodologies of how we bring human beings together. There's methodologies such as deep democracy, or the work that reconnects, for example. These are just a tiny amount of a whole vast array of methodologies. But the process of the gathering is far more important than the outcome of what's at the end. So if we were to ask questions around towards the end of the night, it would be interesting to spend more about what people have found to be really special about the magic of gathering in these spaces. So I'm going to not take up any more time in this space, but I will encourage you to check out the work that we are doing at Tula.town. And if you can support in any way, that would be wonderful. We have really noticed that as humanity have moved into these digital spaces, we've become aware that they're increasingly set up for business type gatherings and not so much catered for public ones. So for example, I was in a meeting recently with the people that are involved with building the technology that sits behind this conversation that holds us together tonight. And they were seeing big problems with certain features that they hadn't even considered. So, you know, the mute feature that we're using also well tonight, they were finding issues that many students have been muting their teachers and making them unable to talk. So they were frantically running around trying to recode and change this, because they've never had to consider that more than just business meetings will take place in this space. So it's an interesting proposition. Yeah, let me just see where that one is. So that's one of the big reasons why I moved from the work we were doing with Democracy Earth Foundation, which was basically text-based engagement, and moved more into one which encourages people to show up in this space. And there's been a number of studies done in this which suggest it is a real significant connection that happens to us. So there was a study done on young children where they showed their parents a video of them connecting through FaceTime, and they showed them the actual live footage of them connecting to them through FaceTime. And there was a huge difference in there. And that would be similar to some of the experiences that I've had in this space, is that when we physically show up here, there's a huge difference that happens as opposed to just being present through audio or present through text-based exchange. There's something that happens to us as humans when we assemble at the same time, regardless of how we're connected.